The smell, even now, 7 months later, was the first thing that hit him. It wasn't the acrid, choking smoke of the fire itself, but the lingering, insidious scent of damp ash and burnt dreams that had permeated everything. It clung to his clothes, his hair, his skin, even after multiple showers. It was the scent of failure. Leo Lionheart Moretti, as the food critics had once so affectionately dubbed him, stood on what used to be the threshold of the Hearth and Hammer. Now, it was just a gaping maw, framed by charred timbers and a rusted, skeletal remains of what was once a grand iron door. The morning sun, usually a herald of bustling kitchen activity and aromatic promise, instead cast long, judgmental shadows through the vacant window frames, highlighting the emptiness within. He pushed his hands deep into the pockets of his worn chef's whites, the ones he refused to throw away. They were clean, of course, laundered countless times, but they felt like a costume now, a uniform for a role he no longer played. He was just Leo, a man in his early 40s, with the tired eyes of someone who hadn't slept soundly in months, and a perpetual knot in his stomach that felt suspiciously like a lump of unbaked dough. Morning. Leo, the voice belonged to Manny, his former sous chef, now the head cook at some bistro downtown that Leo couldn't bring himself to name, let alone visit. Manny was still wearing his crisp whites, probably just finished a shift. He looked good, healthier, less stressed. The irony tasted like bitter herbs. "Morning, Manny," Leo replied, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Just checking in." Manny nodded, his gaze sweeping over the wreckage. "Still the same, huh?" "More so, if that's possible." Leo sighed, running a hand through his perpetually unruly dark hair, now flecked with more gray than he cared to admit. "Looks like a bomb went off, or a dragon sneezed." He tried to force a weak chuckle, but it caught in his throat. The Hearth and Hammer. His life's work. A monument to every culinary dream he'd ever had since he was a scrawny kid watching his nonna roll pasta in their tiny Brooklyn kitchen. He'd poured every dime, every drop of sweat, every ounce of his creative soul into that place. The exposed brick, sourced from an old factory building. The custom-built wood-fired oven, the actual hearth of the operation, where he'd crafted his signature sourdoughs and slow-roasted meats. The hand-forged copper pots, the hammer, reflecting his philosophy of honest, robust cooking. He'd taken a massive loan, mortgaged his small apartment, and convinced a few trusting friends to invest. They'd believed in him. The critics had raved. Reservations were booked out months in advance. He was on top of the world. Then, one Tuesday night, 2 hours after closing, a faulty electrical wire behind the old refrigerator gave up the ghost. Leo remembered the call, the frantic drive through deserted streets, the horrifying sight of flames licking at the night sky, his dreams going up in smoke. He'd stood there, numb, watching firefighters battle the inferno. The heat on his face, a cruel mockery of the warmth his kitchen used to exude. When they finally let him get close, the smell was indescribable. His entire world reduced to cinders and ash. The insurance claim had been a nightmare. They dragged their feet, found loopholes, hinted at negligence. After months of legal wrangling, they finally settled, but it was barely enough to cover a fraction of the structural damage, let alone replace his custom equipment, his precious knives, his meticulously curated wine cellar. The loan sharks were circling, his friends were politely, but firmly, asking about their investments, and his bank account was a desolate wasteland. He had tried, in those early weeks, to cling to hope. He'd walked through the skeletal remains, sketching new layouts, imagining a brighter future. He'd even tried to recreate some of his dishes in his tiny apartment kitchen, but the magic was gone. The precise measurements felt meaningless, the flavors flat. Every whisk, every stir, every chop was haunted by the ghost of the hearth and hammer. "You still got that little place in Bushwick, right?" Manny asked, pulling Leo back from his reverie. "Your apartment?" Leo nodded, grimacing. "For now, the bank's getting impatient." "I heard about the insurance," Manny said softly, sympathetically. "Brutal, man. Absolutely brutal." Leo just shrugged. What was there to say? It was brutal. It was soul-crushing. It was the end. "Listen, the guys at the Gilded Spoon are looking for a pastry chef. Just for the summer, maybe longer. I could put in a good word. It's not, the hearth. But it's a job. Good pay." Leo felt a flicker of something in his chest. Not hope, but a familiar pang of indignation. The Gilded Spoon. A Michelin-starred temple of molecular gastronomy. All foams and gels and edible flowers. Everything Leo detested about modern cooking. He cooked with his heart, with tradition, with the robust flavors of the earth. He built honest food, food that comforted, food that told a story. The Gilded Spoon told a story of scientific precision and pretentious presentation. "Thanks, Manny," Leo said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "But pastry? You know I'm a savory guy. My croissants would probably come out tasting like roasted garlic." Manny chuckled, a genuine, warm sound that made Leo feel even more isolated. "A job's a job, Leo. We all gotta eat." "Yeah," Leo murmured, turning his gaze back to the ruined facade. "But sometimes the appetite's just not there." Manny lingered for a moment, then clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't give up, Lionheart. You'll figure it out. You always do." Leo watched Manny walk away, his crisp whites disappearing around the corner. Don't give up. Easy for him to say. He had a job, a future. Leo had this pile of charred wood and broken glass. He spent the next few weeks in a haze. He would wake up, walk to the shell of his restaurant, just to stand there, sometimes for hours. He'd sip lukewarm coffee from a thermos, watch the city wake up around him, and feel nothing but a heavy, suffocating weight. He stopped answering calls from friends, ignored emails from creditors, and ate instant noodles for dinner. A grim irony for a man who once crafted sublime-tasting menus. One afternoon, as he was tracing the outline of where the pass used to be, a small elderly woman with sharp, kind eyes approached him. She wore a floral apron over a simple dress and carried a shopping bag. "Chef Moretti?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Leo blinked, startled. "Yes? I'm Mrs. Rodriguez. I live down the street. I used to eat here every Sunday with my granddaughters." She gestured with her chin towards the skeletal structure. "They loved your lasagna. Said it tasted like their abuela's, but fancier." She gave a small, warm smile. Leo felt a blush creep up his neck. That's very kind of them. This is a tragedy." "What happened?" she continued, her gaze lingering on the ruins. "This place, it was a heart of the neighborhood, not just for the food, but for the life it brought." Leo nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "My granddaughters, they keep asking if the Lionheart Chef will open again. They miss your bread." She then reached into her shopping bag and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden lion, no bigger than his palm. It was painted in vibrant blues and golds. "My grandson carved this for you. He said you were like the lion, strong." and you would roar again. Leo took the tiny lion. It felt warm in his hand, smooth and solid. He turned it over, tracing the carved mane. A child's simple, unwavering faith. It felt like a punch to the gut. He hadn't roared in months. He hadn't even whimpered. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez," he managed, his voice thick. "Please thank your grandson. It's beautiful." She nodded, her eyes twinkling. "He believes in you. We all do." With another small smile, she turned and walked away, leaving Leo standing there, clutching the wooden lion, the smell of ash and burnt dreams still heavy in the air, but now mixed with something else. A faint, almost imperceptible scent. Something like hope. Or maybe just the lingering aroma of Mrs. Rodriguez's Sunday dinner, still warm in her shopping bag. Whatever it was enough to crack the suffocating silence in his chest. Just a little. He looked at the little wooden lion, then at the desolate expanse of the hearth and hammer. Roar again? The very idea felt absurd, laughable even. But as he stood there, the sun now higher, warming his face, he thought about Nonna. Nonna, who never let a single crumb go to waste. Nonna, who believed that true cooking was about feeding people, not just their stomachs, but their souls. And Nonna would never, ever let a fire be the end of her story. She'd just find a new way to light the stove. He closed his eyes, taking a deep, shaky breath. The ghost of the restaurant was still there, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the only spirit lingering in the ruins. Perhaps there was still a spark, however faint, of the Lionheart chef, waiting to be fanned back into a flame. The question was, what did he have left to burn? And more importantly, what could he build from the ashes when everything he thought he knew was gone? The answer remained elusive, a whispered promise lost in the lingering scent of smoke. The little wooden lion sat on the corner of his cluttered coffee table, a silent, colorful sentinel in a sea of brown cardboard boxes and unopened mail. Leo would stare at it for long stretches, turning it over in his mind. Strong. You will roar again. The words of a child. Simple. Uncomplicated. A world away from the legal jargon in the foreclosure notice that now served as a coaster for his mug of stale coffee. The bank wasn't just getting impatient. They had set a date. He had 6 weeks. 6 weeks to undo 7 months of paralysis. 6 weeks to find a new life, a new income, a new reason to not just pack it all in and move somewhere anonymous. Somewhere no one had ever heard of Chef Lionheart Moretti. The thought was tempting. He could go work on a fishing boat in Alaska, get a job as a line cook in some diner off Route 66, disappear. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Manny's number. The Gilded Spoon. A job's a job. We all gotta eat. Manny's words echoed in his head. It felt like swallowing glass. But what choice did he have? Pastry, foams, gels. He imagined himself meticulously placing a single micro-basil leaf on a deconstructed strawberry tart with tweezers, a little part of his soul shriveling with each delicate placement. He could do it. He was a professional. But it wouldn't be cooking. It would be surrender. He tossed the phone back on the couch. Not yet. That evening, rummaging through a box labeled Kitchen Misk, searching for a can opener, his fingers brushed against something familiar. A leather-bound book, worn at the edges, the cover softened with age and grease stains. He pulled it out. Nonna Elena's Kitchen, his grandmother's recipe book. It wasn't a formal book, just a simple ledger filled with her looping, elegant cursive, recipes interspersed with notes, memories, and the occasional wine stain. He sat on the floor, the open box spilling its contents around him, and began to read. He wasn't looking for recipes, not really. He was looking for her. He found the page for her lasagna, the one Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughters loved. The secret wasn't some fancy ingredient. It was time. A 6-hour simmer for the ragu. 3 different kinds of cheese, each with a purpose. Pazienza, Leonardo, she had written in the margin. Patience. He flipped through pages filled with simple, honest food. Pasta e fagioli, bean and pasta soup, peasant food that could make a king weep with joy. Arancini, fried risotto balls, a brilliant way to use up leftovers. Polpette, meatballs so tender they melted in your mouth. It was groundbreaking. None of it would ever earn a Michelin star. It was food meant to be shared, to be eaten with noisy, happy families. It was the food that had made him fall in love with the kitchen in the first place. He closed the book, the smell of old paper and faint garlic filling his senses. The ghost of the hearth and hammer was a sophisticated specter, whispering of tasting, menus, and rave reviews. But the ghost of Nonna Elena was simpler, warmer. It whispered of patience, of feeding people, of starting with what you have. And what did he have? A box of his Nonna's memories, a mountain of debt, and a useless collection of chef's whites. The idea came to him not like a lightning bolt, but like the slow, creeping dawn. A food truck. It was the antithesis of the hearth and hammer. No foundation, no grand dining room, no reservations, just an engine, a griddle, and a window. It was mobile. It was humble. It was honest. It was also completely, ridiculously impossible. A decent food truck cost upwards of $50,000. He had about $53 to his name, but the seed was planted. The next day, for the first time in months, he left his apartment, with a purpose that didn't involve staring at a pile of rubble. He walked. He walked through industrial parks, through the back alleys of Bushwick and Queens, his eyes scanning not for restaurants, but for ghosts of a different kind. He found it 3 days later, tucked away behind a chain-link fence at an old auto body shop. It was a derelict, forgotten thing. A boxy, faded blue step van that looked like it had been retired since the 90s. The tires were flat, rust bloomed like a disease along the wheel wells, and a crude, peeling decal of a cartoon hot dog adorned the side. It was perfect. The old gut bucket? The shop owner, a grizzled man named Sal with oil permanently etched into the lines of his hands, laughed when Leo asked about it. Thing hasn't run in a decade. Engine's probably a solid block of rust. You can have it for $500, basically scrap price. $500. It might as well have been $5 million. That night, Leo did the hardest thing he'd done since the fire. He picked up the phone and dialed Arthur Vance. Art was one of his earliest investors, a retired stockbroker who had genuinely loved the hearth and hammer. He'd lost $100,000 in the fire and hadn't called Leo once to harass him. The silence was almost worse. Leo? Art's voice was surprised, but not cold. Art. Hi. Listen, I know I have no right to be calling you, and Leo's voice cracked. He took a breath. I'm sorry, Art, for everything. There was a pause on the other end. It wasn't your fault, son. It was a fire. Bad luck. I'm going to pay you back, Leo said, the words feeling hollow even to him. Every penny. I don't know how yet. I appreciate that, Leo. Here it was. The moment of truth. Leo swallowed his pride, the taste of it more bitter than burnt garlic. Art, I need to ask you for something. And God, I know how this sounds. I need a loan. Not a big one. It's not for a restaurant. It's for a pile of junk. $2,000. He explained his idea. The rusted truck. The simple, honest food. His nonna's recipes. He expected Art to laugh, or worse, to hang up. Instead, there was a long silence. You know, Leo, Art finally said, his voice thoughtful. The reason I invested in the Hearth and Hammer wasn't the fancy oven or the wine list. It was the bread. That first time you brought me a loaf of that sourdough still warm. It was the most honest thing I'd ever tasted. If you think you can put that feeling into a truck, then I think it's a better investment than the first one. Leo closed his eyes, relief washing over him so intensely he had to sit down. Thank you, Art. I won't let you down. Not again. Don't worry about me, Art said. Just make some damn good food. The next 2 weeks were a blur of grease, rust, and cheap beer. He paid Sal the $500, had the truck towed to a small rented garage space, and called the only person he knew he could trust. A food truck? Manny had said, standing in front of the metal carcass, arms crossed. Leo, this isn't a food truck. This is a tetanus shot waiting to happen. But he stayed. After his shifts at the Gilded Spoon, he'd show up, still in his whites, and help Leo wrestle with the seized engine. They spent hours watching YouTube tutorials, cursing at rusted bolts, and cleaning decades of grime from the interior. Manny knew a guy who knew a guy, and soon they had a second-hand griddle, a couple of propane tanks, and a small, sputtering generator. It wasn't pretty. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a kitchen, cobbled together with favors and the last of arts, money. Finally, the day came. The engine, after a protest of coughs and black smoke, roared to life. It sounded angry, but it was alive. Leo stood inside the cramped metallic space. He'd painted the inside a clean white, but the outside was still faded blue. The ghost of the cartoon hot dog, a faint, mocking smile on the side. He lit the griddle. The whoosh of the propane was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. He pulled out a bowl of his nonna's meatball mixture, made the night before in his apartment. He formed a patty, placed it on the hot surface. The sizzle filled the small space, loud and defiant. He sliced an onion, the sharp smell cutting through the stale air. He toasted a simple bun. The aroma wasn't complex or sophisticated. It was the smell of onions and beef, of garlic and oregano. It was the smell of his childhood. It smelled nothing like the damp ash of his ruin. He assembled the sandwich, wrapped it in wax paper, and just held it. It was hot. It was real. It was a start. A week later, he was parked on a quiet, industrial street corner in Red Hook, the generator humming nervously beside the truck. He'd hand-painted a simple sign and hung it in the window. Lionheart's Kitchen. Honest food. His entire menu consisted of 3 items: the nonna meatball sub, pasta e fagioli, and arancini. He flipped the little hand-carved open sign in the window. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was terrified. The ghost of the hearth and Hammer felt closer than ever, its cold fingers on his neck, whispering that this was a joke. That he was a joke. From a temple of gastronomy to a rust bucket on a street corner. He waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. A city bus rumbled by, ignoring him. A few cars sped past. The sidewalk remained empty. The sun beat down on the metal roof, turning the small kitchen into an oven. Sweat dripped down his back. The knot in his stomach, the one that had been his constant companion for 7 months, tightened its grip. He looked at the little wooden lion he'd propped up on the dashboard. Roar again. He felt more like a mouse in a metal box. Another 10 minutes crawled by, each second stretching into an eternity of silence and doubt. He leaned against the counter, the smell of the simmering tomato sauce, the only thing keeping him company, and wondered if he hadn't just built himself a brand-new tomb. An hour felt like a lifetime. The simmering sauce began to stick to the bottom of the pot, and the silence in the truck was deafening, broken only by the generator's anxious hum. Leo was on the verge of killing the engine, of admitting this whole thing was a pathetic, greasy fantasy, when a shadow fell across the service window. He looked up to see a man in a dusty, hard hat and a fluorescent yellow vest, built like a brick wall with a salt and pepper mustache. He squinted at the small, hand-painted menu. "Lionheart's Kitchen, huh?" the man rumbled, his voice a gravelly baritone. Big name for a little truck. Leo's heart did a nervous flip. Just a name. Nonna Meatball Sub. The man read, then looked at Leo, his expression unreadable. "My Nonna made meatballs. Tasted like heaven and garlic. $10 says yours don't." "It's a bet I'll lose happily," Leo said, his voice steadier than he felt. "1 sub." "Make it 2. My partner's back in the rig." Leo's hands moved with an instinct he thought he'd lost. He sliced the fresh rolls, toasted them on the griddle, spooned the hot, fragrant meatballs into their cradle, and topped them with a slice of provolone that melted instantly. He wrapped them in wax paper, the crinkling sound a sudden symphony. He passed the 2 subs through the window. The construction worker handed him a 20. He took a huge bite of his sub right there, leaning against the side of the truck. He chewed slowly, his eyes closed in concentration. Leo held his breath. The man swallowed, opened his eyes, and looked straight at Leo. "Damn," he said, a slow grin spreading across his face. "You owe me $10. Leo felt a laugh bubble up from his chest, a genuine, unforced laugh that felt foreign and wonderful. That day, he sold 12 sandwiches, mostly to other workers from the nearby construction site. The next day, 20. By the end of the week, he knew most of them by name. Frank always wanted extra onions. Dave liked his bread extra toasty. Miguel, the youngest of the crew, came every day for the arancini. Leo wasn't just cooking, he was connecting. From the pass at the Hearth and Hammer, his customers had been faceless tickets, anonymous orders. Here, at this window, they were people. He'd hear about their kids, their weekends, their complaints about the foreman. In return, they got a hot meal, made with care. It was a simple, honest transaction that fed more than just their hunger. The turning point came on a Tuesday, 2 weeks in. Miguel, a kid who lived his life on his phone, had posted a picture on Instagram. It was a close-up of a meatball sub, cheese stretching dramatically, with a simple caption, "This truck in Red Hook is unreal. The chef is a legend. Lionheart's Kitchen, your best sub in Brooklyn." It started small. A few foodies, always on the hunt for the next authentic bite, showed up. Then a local blogger, a young woman with bright pink hair, ordered one of everything. Leo felt a familiar pang of anxiety. The ghost of his past life whispered in his ear, "Impress her. Show her you're still Chef Moretti." He was tempted to add a sprig of parsley, a drizzle of balsamic glaze, something to elevate the dish. He looked at the wooden lion on his dashboard, then at the line of hungry construction workers forming behind the blogger. He shook his head. He was Leo. This was his kitchen. He served her the food exactly as he served it to Frank and Dave. Honest. No pretense. The blog post was titled, "How a Michelin-Starred Chef's Burnt-Out Dream Became the Best Lunch in Brooklyn." It told his whole story. The fire, the failure, the faded blue truck. It went viral overnight. The next morning, the line stretched down the block. It was a chaotic mix of office workers in suits, hipsters on skateboards, and curious neighborhood locals. Manny showed up in the middle of the lunch rush, his eyes wide. He didn't say a word, just rolled up his sleeves, squeezed into the cramped space, and started taking orders, a seamless return to the dance they had perfected years ago. In the middle of that chaotic, beautiful mess, Leo looked up and saw a familiar face. Mrs. Rodriguez, holding the hands of her two granddaughters, stood patiently in line. When she finally got to the window, her eyes twinkled. "We saw you on the computer," she said, beaming. "My grandson. He told everyone he knew the IB Lionheart chef. Is the lasagna on the secret menu?" the older granddaughter asked shyly. Leo's heart swelled. He hadn't made it, but the question was enough. "Not today," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But tell you what, come back this Friday, just for you guys." He handed them 3 arancini on the house, and as he watched the little girls bite into the crispy, cheesy rice balls, their faces lighting up with pure joy, he knew this feeling. This was worth more than all the stars and accolades in the world. This was success. A month later, a sleek black town car pulled up across the street. A man in a tailored suit got out. It was Arthur Vance. He didn't get in line, just stood and watched for a long time as Leo and Manny worked in perfect harmony, shouting, laughing, and slinging sandwiches. When the rush finally died down, Leo wiped his hands on his apron and walked over, an envelope in his hand. "Art," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "The first payment. It's not much, but it's a start." Art looked at the envelope, then at Leo's face, smudged with flour and tomato sauce, his eyes bright and alive. He gently pushed Leo's hand away. "Keep it, son," he said, a warm smile on his face. "Buy a bigger pot. Consider my investment paid in full." He looked at the line of happy customers and back at the truck. "This is a better return than any stock IB ever picked." That evening, as the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the industrial Brooklyn streets, Leo leaned against the side of his truck, a bottle of water in his hand. The faded blue paint seemed to shine. The ghost of the cartoon hot. Dog looked like it was winking at him. He was exhausted, his muscles ached, and he smelled like fried onions, but he had never felt more at peace. He climbed inside to clean up, the familiar motions a comforting ritual. He wiped down the griddle, the metal still warm. He polished the small service window until it gleamed. His eyes fell on the little wooden lion on the dashboard, now wearing a small, accidental splatter of tomato sauce like a badge of honor. He smiled. He thought of the name the critics had given him. Lionheart. He'd thought it was about being bold, about being the king of a grand culinary kingdom. He realized now he'd gotten it all wrong. It wasn't about the roar that announced your presence to the world. It was about the quiet, steady courage it took to get back up after you'd been knocked down. It was about the strength to trade. A crown for an apron. A palace for a metal box on wheels. The ghost of the hearth and hammer was gone. It hadn't been exorcised by fame or fortune, but by the simple, healing act of cooking. It had been replaced by the warm, lingering spirits of his Nonna's kitchen, of new friends, and of a community fed. He closed the service window, locked the door, and listened to the generator sputter to a stop. In the sudden, peaceful silence, Leo Moretti stood in the heart of his new kingdom, no longer a chef in exile, but a man who had finally, truly, found his way home. Leo's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes we have to lose everything to find what truly matters. It's not about the size of the kitchen, but the size of the heart you cook with. It shows us that a comeback doesn't always mean rebuilding what you had before, but building something new, something more honest, from the ashes. We would love to hear what this story meant to you. What lesson did you take away from Leo's journey? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have a comeback story of your own or know someone who does, we would be honored if you shared it with our community. Your stories inspire all of us. If this video moved you, please give it a like to help it reach more people, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on our next story. Whatever fires you might be facing in your own life, may you find the strength to sift through the ashes and find that one ember of hope. May you find your own peace after the chaos. Be well.